When you're in the forest, do you ever feel like you're being watched? Got a coast live oak that is growing out of an atrium, and it's quite heavy out there. Before I go too much farther, I wanted to explain a new tool that I just purchased. It's called the Petzl Spin L1D. It's a one-way pulley that provides friction in one direction to slow down the load. It's rated at 6 kilonewtons, and 8 kilonewton is roughly 224 pounds, so its working rated strength is about 1,300 pounds. I think it's quite useful. It also is rotatable, so that if you're positioning it, you can twist the pulley. I think it's a good tool. I'm glad I got it. We tried it out on this tree. It's also able to put the rope in midway, so you don't have to thread it through, which is huge. Because of the way it grows, it's kind of a one-sided whippy tree that's reaching for its own space, so it's not really balanced very well. So I believe that in a windstorm, that section up there is a possibility for breakage. So I'm going to get all the dead wood out of that, and I think we need to get some end weight out of this thing too. Making these decisions about these trees is often predicated by what's underneath the tree. And we got a skylight over there, and we've got this whole flat roof. If this thing should break a branch and come down, it could cause some considerable damage. So I always have to weigh out, not taking off too much foliage, so the tree can sustain itself, versus branches that appear to be too heavy. Okay. Are you ready? Yep. What I'm showing here in this particular video is an unusual specimen of a coast live oak. It was a very tall, very lanky, almost like a long fishing pole of a tree, and it was growing over a roof. It came out of a atrium area, and what I'm doing here is I'm trying to set a second line for Jorge, because it was so whippy out there. He did not feel comfortable going out to make this cut. And our decision on this tree was to take enough end weight off of this long whippy tree to minimize the breakage. It was a very difficult job for Jorge to do, and for both of us. I'm working ground, I'm doing the roping, but we couldn't drop anything of any significance on the roof, because it was a thin, flat top type of a roof, and one impact would have caused a leak that would have put me out of business. So we've got 2 ropes set up here, and he's able to do some work. Unfortunately, I had to set the camera down and turn it off so that I could make this move here. I'm sorry I didn't catch that on video, but this was the individual cut that we took. It was probably 200 pounds of end weight in one big cut, and he was rocking and reeling up there, and I lowered it down. This branch, by the way, is full of young acorns, and the acorns last year were a huge problem with many, many oak trees breaking limbs. I think it has something to do with the drought conditions, and the trees are producing an abundance of seeds, and I'm seeing it again. This is cool. Jorge is very adept at working with 2 ropes at the same time, sometimes 3 ropes, and he ties multiple Blake's hitch knots. And in this case, he's using both of them to descend out of the tree, which isn't easy. It's one thing to use a single lowering knot or lowering device, but to use 2 of them at the same time and manage your chainsaw and manage the tools that are dangling. It's a good thing he's got a good ground worker. He did a very, very good job on this. I'm impressed with Jorge. He's been with me for 26 years. We've been working as a team. And this is another job. I want you to take note of all of these dried out dieback spots throughout the tree. My first thoughts were squirrel damage. I thought maybe squirrels were up there chewing on the bark and causing these dried out spots. But I went up and inspected it, and it was not squirrel damage. It's something else. And I was doing some creative observations and a little bit of dissecting of the twigs and seeing what I could find. So I did find a few little insect holes I see drying out. You can see the discoloration of the healthy wood versus the dried out portions of the twigs. And it's also, there's that little insect hole. I'm loving the new camera on my iPhone 13. It really does a great job of super close-up macro images. But there you can see a little bit of the discoloration running down the twig, and many of these twigs were half dead and half alive. So I'm sure they're going to continue to die back. And what I neglected to say is we worked on this tree a month ago, and all of this damage, all of these brown spots occurred within the last 30 days. So this is all fairly new. And what I'm looking for here is, this is where the entry hole of the insect was. I wanted to see if there was any kind of a gallery or any kind of a distance that the insect would have gone, but I didn't see any. So I sliced it with my knife in layers, and I was looking to see if I could find out any more information. Identifying diseases in trees that are unknown involves a lot of detective work. And I'm hoping one of you guys out there is going to, write in the comments and say, "Oh, I absolutely know what this is," because I'm not sure. I have my suspicions, but I'm not going to say what I think it is because I don't know for sure. And I've sent some images out to some other friends, some other arborists, and I'm hoping one of them comes back and says, this is what the problem is. But you're seeing it as I'm seeing it, so tell me what you think. So I want to show some of the other signs that I'm finding. There's some wet wood on the twigs. It wasn't everywhere, but there was some areas where there was some wet wood. And you can see that many of these branches, these twigs, are half dead and half alive. So I was trying to show areas that you could see the transition of the infection. So as you can see, I did some slicing. So there you can see the white wood going into the brown discoloration of whatever disease is attacking this tree. There's yet another insect hole. I found another one. Boy, that close-up is amazing. And even closer still. It's the new iPhone 13. So you're going to see more and more close-ups with clarity like this. And this is what it looked like when I was all done. We took out as much as we could, but I'm documenting this so that I can go back in another month. And I forgot to tell you that all of this happened within 30 days.
I've come to the conclusion that most of my clients like the idea of having a small orchard more than they like to take care of the orchard. And that includes picking the fruit. I can't tell you how often I come into some client's orchard property and all the fruit is on the ground. And they pick nothing. I mean, the plums here. Plums are a great fruit, but they all come ripe at once and you got to deal with them really, really quickly. There's a pluot, combination between a plum and apricot, and they're starting to fall on the ground. There's still a few of them up there, but I'd bet money that they don't come out and pick them. And then they have their gardeners do the trimming. And, yep. So what's going on there? Was that a limb that was too heavily laden with fruit and it broke because nobody was paying attention to it? There's an apple tree, and look at all the plums on the ground here. Those all came off of that tree back over there. There's an apricot tree, and there's full of apricots underneath it. Here's another apricot tree, and all the apricots have all dried up, but they're all over the ground. They're done. So hopefully they picked a few of them, but I'd be surprised if they did. You know, one thing that I often recommend to people that say they want to plant fruit trees is avoid the fruit trees that are fast to produce and you need to harvest them real quick. An apple is a good choice. You get apples on there and they're on the tree, for sometimes a month or 5 weeks, staying ripe. And they're on there for a long, long time. Most citrus will stay on there for a long, long time. But rapid producers like cherries and plums and apricots and peaches and nectarines, they go really fast. And if you're not on them and you're not paying attention to your fruit trees, like sadly most of my clients, the fruit just either gets absorbed into the ground or the animals get them. It just, to me, the idea of having fruit trees seems to be more prevalent than taking responsibility for the fruit trees. But me, I get the fruit if I'm lucky enough to be here when it's ripe. Another thing that really makes me question landscapers or people that want to keep their yards real tidy is decorative mulch. Decorative mulch is okay if you don't have trees, but if you have trees like these big oaks that are constantly dropping their leaves down, then you've constantly got a different color. So most of the decorative mulches are darker. In this case, this is redwood bark, tan bark, shredded bark. All those things are all different types of bark mulches that are even and consistent. But you see, I've spent a lot of time lightly blowing this area to get all these lighter colored leaves off of the decorative mulch. At least they leave the natural mulch underneath the trees over here. But, it just seems like, if they had picked wood chips or light colored mulch, something that matches the color of the leaves, then it would become accumulative rather than separating out for the tidiness of the color. I mean, it looks pretty, but it's a lot of work to keep it up. Now, this whole area was covered with the decorative mulch, but the leaf drop overwhelmed it, so they just gave up on it. So they spent a lot of money for the color, only to have the leaf drop and the natural mulch overwhelm it. So something to think about.